Put the invocation on the screen, please. All right, everybody, I hope is ready. So let's begin with the invocation. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Guru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Ya Kundendu Tusharahara Dhavala Ya Shubhra Vastravrita Ya Veena Varadanda Manditakara Ya Shveta Padmasana या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिर्देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः अज्ञानान्धस्य लोकस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. Good morning, everyone. And for those of you tuning in from other parts of the world, good afternoon, good evening. Maybe some of you are tuning in at night, so good night to all of you. I hope that everybody sleeps on time. My pranams to my parents, because of whose continued support and unwavering enthusiasm for me to and my brother to pursue whatever it was that we thought was our passion. It's only because of that we were able to do anything at all. So my eternal gratitude to them. Something very interesting is that, you know, in life we always we go through phases where we desire to do a particular thing, then we feel, I want to do this now, I want to do this now. And it especially happens when we're growing up. So at that time, my parents were such that whenever I would express some desire that, okay, I want to do this now, then they would be the first ones to go forward, and they were always 2 steps ahead of me. They would do the research, they would find out, okay, in order to do well in this field, you should do this, here are all your options. And I found that while many of my friends, their parents were, you know, forcing them to be doctors or engineers or something like that, because of my parents' ability to put my passions first, even for them, I was able to pursue something that I found has the maximum meaning, has made my life the most meaningful. So my gratitude to them always. So until now, we have seen a few different concepts. We started with studying language as a whole. What is language in general? Maybe you might want to come here so that you can eventually see the screen when we need to. So we started with studying language as a whole in general. What are the principles of language? We saw what is special about Sanskrit. How does Sanskrit function? What linguistic principles go into making Sanskrit so special? And then we started on our quest of actually studying Sanskrit. So we saw the alphabet. Then we saw the Maheshwara Sutras, which are these initial sutras that give us the alphabet in a very special order so that we can refer to many letters at the same time in only one syllable, in a single syllable. And after seeing the Maheshwara Sutras, we went further and we saw some basic ideas that we need to be familiar with before studying grammar properly. So we looked into the names of the different letters. We looked into the different types of vowels that are there. So we saw that a, I, U, and R, these 4 vowels have 18 different forms. And then Lr, A, O, I, Au, these vowels have 12 different forms because they lack one of the particular lengths that we talked about. And last time what we did was we very quickly went through a bunch of different terminologies. As I had explained, every field, every discipline has its own technical terms. And so we had to go through some technical terms. This is one of those necessary evils, the first hurdle that we have to get across. And once we are familiar with them, it's not like we have to memorize them or anything like that, so hardcore, you know. But once we become familiar with these technical terms, then we can move forward and our journey becomes much smoother. And that's why last time what we did was we very quickly just went through, this means this, this means this, this means this, and these have these features. And so the way I see it is like this. What we have been doing thus far is, in order to create this house, we want to create this big house of Sanskrit, okay? And in order to create this house, we have to collect some materials. Until now, what we were doing was we were collecting the materials. We collected the bricks, we collected the cement, the mortar, we collected the plaster. And although these things don't really seem to have anything in common at first, they're like, oh, what are you doing? You're just jumping to this point, to this point, to this point. But it's only once we have collected these various elements that we can finally start putting them together to make the house. So I have some good news for you all. And the good news is that all the boring stuff is now over. so now we can actually finally move in to building our house. So before you actually build a house, what's the first thing that you have to do? The first thing you have to do is you have to look at your blueprint, right? You have to look at what is that sheet of paper that gives me the full vision of the house before I begin actually building in real life. So the blueprint for us, when we study Sanskrit grammar, our blueprint for building this big house, this big brick house of Sanskrit, is one text by Panini, whose story I also told in our second session. There's a text by Panini called the Ashtadhyayi. Ashtadhyayi. Now, Ashta, the word means 8, and Adhyaya means chapter. So Ashtadhyayi means that text which has 8 chapters. This is just how texts used to be named, I guess. We have lots of such texts. So this one is called the Ashtadhyayi, but it's so famous that it doesn't need any other name. It doesn't need any other name because everybody knows. As soon as you say Ashtadhyayi, they know, oh yes, that is that book which has 8 chapters that's by Panini and it's about Sanskrit grammar. Everybody already knows that it's so famous that we don't need to call it any other name. But it is also called by another name, which is Sutra Patha. Sutra Patha. Now, Sutra Patha means the collection of sutras. And this collection of sutras is our blueprint. These are all of the rules by which we will be building our house. So I want you to imagine something. This Ashtadhyayi is made up of lots and lots of sutras. And these sutras are split into various prakaranas. And a prakarana means like a little section, little topic subheadings are there in the Ashtadhyayi. We have lots and lots and lots and lots of topic subheadings. And these prakaranas contain one particular operation. A sutra tells us some particular operation. It tells us some action that we have to perform on a set of sounds or a particular word. And so the way that the Ashtadhyayi is arranged is into these little topic subheadings that tell us one particular action. And the way to visualize this, the way that Panini has seen the whole thing is like this. When you enter your kitchen, then you have one particular cupboard for pots and pans. You have one drawer that has your utensils. You have one drawer that has your cutlery. You have one cupboard that has only masalas. If you walk into an Indian household, and there will be one cupboard where there are only lots and lots and lots and lots of different types of powders, these masalas that are just there for spicing the food. So we have one place where we place that. And then in a very separate place, we have one place where we keep our brooms and our pans for the brooms and all that stuff, our cleaning utensils. In the same way, what Panini has done is he has kept these little cupboards, okay? And all these cupboards are the various prakaranas, these topics in the Ashtadhyayi. And each one, as you open it, has a particular task that you perform to make this food, which is the word that we will eventually speak. So the way in which he's organized it is like that. Now, you may be wondering, okay, fine, but I just want to see a sutra. What is a sutra finally? Which is fine, that's a good desire. So let's talk about that right now. So Srijitji, if you can please share my screen. Okay. So you might be wondering, sutra? What is a sutra? Now, this slide is where I have written my notes. But what I will do actually is I will show you one verse, which is also some notes that were prepared by me. Here, there we go. So what is a sutra finally? This is what we want to know. What is a sutra? So we have this verse that defines a sutra. Even though the sutras are the rules that will define our language of Sanskrit, but even a sutra has a definition. There is nothing that is left untouched. Okay. So this verse goes like this. Can you turn that, Shreyaji? Okay. So we have this verse that goes like this. Alpaksharama sandigdham. You can repeat.
Alpaksharama sandigdham
Saravat vishvato mukham.
Saravat vishvato mukham
Astobham anavadyam cha.
Astobham anavadyam cha
Sutram sutravido viduhu.
Sutram sutravido viduhu.
So what's really awesome about Sanskrit is that because it's so flexible, it's so unbelievably flexible. You can, these word order and all that stuff is so flexible that almost everything that we end up doing is somehow in some meter. It's in a metrical form. It's in a verse. It's in a stanza type format. And so even the definition of a sutra, and this is just one thing, but we have so many huge philosophical works. You would have heard of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, these giant epics, the Bhagavad Gita, which is one core philosophical work that we have, and so many different things, which are all written in meter. They are all written in verse. That's one of the amazing things about Sanskrit. And even today, many times I think of some idea, and somehow naturally my mind wants to put it into a meter. It wants to put it into a verse format. So I ended up writing so many verses just because Sanskrit allows for that. Sanskrit pushes you to write in verse because it's so syllabic and so, it's so perfectly designed for meter. So this verse here is the definition of a sutra. We have 4 parts of each verse, and they're called padas. And one pada means 1/4. So we have 4 quarters of this sutra, of this verse. And Sanskrit is what is known as a syllabic language. That means we think in syllables. And one syllable contains one vowel. This is the way in which we approach our language. One syllable equals one vowel. And in fact, that's the way that it is in just about every language. So here we have 8 syllables in one pada, in one quarter of this verse. So you have a total of 32 syllables in the verse. So we look at the last pada, which is sutram sutra vido viduhu. And so if you count, you can count always 8 vowels in each pada. And this particular meter. There are other meters that have 12 vowels in one pada, that have 11 vowels in one pada, and so on. So here, if we look at the last one, we have sutram sutra vido viduhu. This means that a sutram, that is a sutra, sutra vido, the people who know sutras, viduhu, have known or know. The people who know sutras, they know sutras to be like this. That's what this last pada means. Many times we define things like this. And the great wise men, they know it to be true like this. So how is it that they know a sutra to be? What is a sutra like? Alpaksharam. That's the first word. Alpaksharam. It means that a sutra has to have the minimum number of letters possible. Akshara means letter, and alpa means small, minimum, a tiny amount. So alpakshara means that sutra had better be small, because we have to remember it, and so the sutra had better be very tiny. And we love brevity. Remember, last time and the time before I had mentioned that Laghava Priyaha Paniniyaha, the people who study Panini, who study Vyakarana, they love Laghavam. And Laghava means shortness, brevity. They love that. So they also have put it into their verse. Hey, your sutra had better be brief. Then we have Asandigdham. Asandigdham. This means it should not be confusing. The word Sandigdham means confused, confusing. It's something which is murky. And asandigdham, that when you put in front of something, it means it's a particle of negation. So not that it should not be confusing. It should not be something where you feel like, like what does that mean? So suppose I say, for example, suppose I say, it's there. Okay, it's very brief. It has very few letters. But as soon as I say it's there, the first question you ask is, what's there? What are you talking about? And where? Where are you pointing to? Okay, you said it's there. And then you say, oh, I mean to say that my room is all the way in Shivashri, which is the building that I live in. So I said it in a very brief, it's there. But if you're not able to understand, if it's confusing, then there's no point also. So it should be asandigdham. Then Saravat. So suppose I say something very short and very not confusing. Burger. Okay, I said this word. It's very short. It's not confusing. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm referring to. But it's not meaningful. It doesn't actually end up conveying anything to you. It doesn't actually mean anything on its own. So the sutra has to also be meaningful. Vishvato Mukham. Vishvato Mukham means that when you say one sutra, that sutra should apply in 5 different places. It shouldn't just be that this sutra only means this one thing for this one tiny case. Sometimes that happens, but for the most part, a sutra should be all-encompassing. It should talk about many things at the same time. Astobham. You shouldn't repeat what you already said. So I have 2 sutras next to each other. First sutra, pencil. The second sutra, pencil. Then you say, what's the point of this 2 sutras in a row that have the same meaning? So it should not be repetitive, and it should also not have any stoppages in between. A sutra is one complete thought. It should not be like 2-3 thoughts in one sutra. And then finally, anavadyam. Anavadyam literally means something that you cannot repeat, or you cannot. It should not be something that is unintelligible. It should not be flawed. It shouldn't be something where I feel, oh, I don't want to repeat this because it has so many flaws. somebody had to correct it 5-6 times already. Why should I repeat this sutra? So it has to be anavadyam, which means flawless. It should not have any flaws. So this is the meaning of a sutra. A sutra, this is what a sutra is. And so Panini has written some 4,000 sutras. It's less than that, okay? It's 3,983, something like that amount of sutras. Panini has written this, you know, when they give a price tag, then they never say $400. They'll always say $399.99, right? They always put it that way. Why is it? Because when you see that number 399, you think, okay, it's within the 300 range, so I can afford that, so I should buy that. If they say 400, then people will say, no way, that's out of my budget. But 399.99, that's okay, that sounds reasonable. So it's not 4,000 sutras, it's 3,983 sutras, totally manageable. Within the 3,000s range, we can totally do it. So we have this, we have these sutras that Panini has written, and these sutras are the rules that determine the operations that we perform on the language in order to make it something intelligible, something that we can actually use when we speak, or something that we can recognize when we read. This is the purpose of Panini's sutras. So now, here's something very interesting. All of language is a game. Language is a game, okay? When you are born, then you start hearing language. People start talking to you, right? They start saying things to you. Sometimes they say really weird things. If you ever see somebody speak to a baby, they sometimes they say the weirdest things. Like that, they'll start talking. And the baby is thinking, okay, this must mean something. All right, okay, I should learn this. And so then later the baby also starts repeating what it hears. Then the baby also says, and you say, oh, my baby is talking, my baby is speaking. The baby is learning the rules of the game from you as you are speaking. So whenever you speak a sentence, then that baby starts to learn the rules immediately, because we're constantly playing this game. And as you grow older, you gain more and more knowledge about the rules. So then you say something like, oh, my friend doed it, right? Because you know past tense means I have to add that D at the end, doed it. So I say that, and for me that's correct, because so far, according to the rules of the game that I have learned, this is correct. Then somebody says, no, your friend did it. There, I have learned one more rule. So as you grow older, as you grow into your language, you learn more and more and more and more rules. And the interesting thing is that when it comes to most languages, there are no real official written rules somewhere. There's no there's no one rule book where you can say, here's the final, the critical edition of the rule book of English language. There's no such one single book that I can read to gain all the rules. So as and different books have different opinions also. Where exactly should I put those commas when I'm making a list in English? Do I put it after the final thing before the word and, or do I not put it there? Some people say you should, some people say you shouldn't. And as you go on, you learn these rules more and more. So much so that near the completion, like once you have learned enough rules, you start making your own also. You start making your own rules. And so as you speak, people are like, this is his style. This is his style because he's the only one who says things like this, in this particular way, using this particular kind of language. So for example, our Guru Swami Chinmayanandaji, when he spoke English, then he used to speak it in a very unique way. He would say things like, and so once a thought is thoughten, like that he'll say. And the reason he says that is, of course, to catch your attention. In the audience, you'll be sitting there, and sometimes some concept may go over your head. So he'll say a word like tatin, and then you'll be like, huh, what is that? But he's speaking, and we understood what he said. So the reason why we were able to understand what he said is because it all falls within some general rule principles that we all have learned over time. And so some people start to then create their own rules as they speak. They start to break the rules a little bit when they speak and when they write and all that stuff. And so all of language is like this game that we play. Okay. Now, Panini has written 2 texts. One I have already mentioned, the Ashtadhyayi. Actually, Panini wrote 5 texts, but we will focus on 2. Okay. His most famous texts are 5 in number, and then we have a bunch of lost texts that we attribute to Panini, but we don't know what they look like, but we know their names. But in any case, there are 2 most significant, most important texts. One is the Ashtadhyayi, which I already mentioned. Ashtadhyayi. It is anyway. I'll write it in our notes, and you can see. And the second thing, actually, can you close this? Thank you. Okay, there we go. Now that's better. So Panini wrote these 2 texts. One is the Ashtadhyayi, and one of them is called the Dhatu Patha. Dhatu Patha. Now the Dhatu Patha is this collection of dhatus, and dhatu means those verbal roots in Sanskrit grammar, verbal roots. So he has these 2 texts that go side by side. Like I said, language is a game that we're constantly playing. What Panini did was he codified the rules of that game. He made it concrete. And he gave us some pieces to play with, which are these dhatus, these verbal roots that we can now play with when we speak to each other. These are our pieces. And the Ashtadhyayi is like the game board. This is the board upon which we play, and it includes some parts of that board which are called pratyayas. And a pratyaya is that thing which you attach your piece, your dhatu to, in order to make a word. And so every time I speak, what I'm doing is I put a dhatu together with one of these pratyayas on the board, defined by the board of the Ashtadhyayi, and I make a word. And then I combine these words and make a sentence. And every time I make a sentence to speak to other people or to write for other people, I am making one move on that board. I make a move in this game. This is the way in which this language functions, okay? It is this giant game. And so we're always playing this game. Now, the interesting thing is, in your life, you should examine your language in this way. See it like this. It's really, it makes language so much fun, because you're constantly seeing how people are dodging and twisting and maneuvering in order to play this game with you, and how you also dodge and twist and maneuver in order to receive their sentences and play the game back with them. Sanskrit is also that way. Now, the difference between Sanskrit and other languages is that where many other or most other languages don't have a written set of rules, Panini has created this very systematic set of rules, these sutras, what I have just defined for you, in order to define the game, which means that there are already now a set of rules in this game. I don't need to now grow up to learn them or interact with people to learn them, but I can learn them directly from the rule book, which we have been given. And so what's really interesting is that when you speak in a language, when you say you speak in English, okay, then that speech is very different from written English. Correct? Even if you were to transcribe what I'm saying to you right now, then it would look really odd on a piece of paper. It would look very strange if it was written. But nevertheless, it's the same language. What I speak and what I write, this English, is the same language. But we have various different kind of ways of putting it together for this. But In Sanskrit, we have the same rule book, this Ashtadhyayi, for spoken and for written Sanskrit. But because of the flexibility of the language, here's what's really interesting. Because of the flexibility of the language, I can order the words in any way that I want. I showed you that example, Ramo Gacchati Vanam, that time. You remember that? And that means Rama goes to the forest. And we can rearrange it in any way we want to. Gacchati Ramaha Vanam Gacchati, Ramaha Gacchati. So we can arrange it any way that we want to. But because when I'm speaking, I have to be creating these sentences on the fly. I have to be creating them constantly. So when I speak, there are certain conventions that I follow. We have particular conventions that we follow. That means things which are normal that everybody understands. Okay, this is how people will speak mostly. So when we produce the language by our mouths, then we follow these conventions. But because in its written form, it is much more thought out. You get a chance to actually think of the sentence in its whole thing before you put it down. So, and due to the innate flexibility of this language, everything is really conducive for writing things in verses. That's one of the most interesting thing. And you can write it in hundreds of different formats. The crazy thing about this language is that it's so flexible that there are even some texts that tell one story in one direction. When you read it in one direction, it tells one particular story, the story of Krishna. And when you read it backwards, literally you read it backwards, then it tells a completely different story, the story of Rama, but in the same meter and perfectly written in verse like that. So these rules codify the language in such a way that you're able to manipulate the words and the syllables so perfectly that you can write one story in one direction and a totally different story in another direction. And we are talking texts of like 100, 200, 300 verses. I mean, these are huge texts that have the whole thing can be read backwards and forwards. It's really, 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 really amazing. So this is about sutras, the codification of a language, the game that we play when we are speaking and when we are reading and listening to a language. So now a natural question comes up. So then can we see a sutra, please? Give us some sutras. So now if you can share my screen again, please, Srijitji. We'll finally see some sutras. The first sutras that we will see, some sample sutras, but also our first sutras. Okay, not these. Yes, these are some sutras. This is also a sutra, but not these. Let's skip ahead. Okay. So let me actually make it like this. Here we go. Something called the Dhatu Samya. Now, when we finally see the sutra, it is doing some action, okay? It's defining something, or it's telling us to actually perform some action. So now we have these little tiny words, okay, which are taken from the universe, as I explained a long time ago. We have these tiny words, and these tiny words are little sets of sounds, like for example, kr, or pa, or da, or ni, or pat, or lik. So we have all these little tiny sets of sounds, and these sounds are just floating somewhere in space, floating around in the universe. So how do we use them? What do we do with them? So the first thing you have to do is you have to name them. Without a name, you cannot interact at all. If your friends didn't have names, then how would you interact with them? I have my friends sitting here. If they didn't have names, then I would just say, hey, friend 1, tell me something. Friend 2, friend 3. But you can't do that. It doesn't work like that. So they have to have names. They have different names. So because of their names, I can actually interact with them. So if these little words which are just floating around in the air don't have names, then I cannot actually interact with them and I cannot perform some function on them. So the first thing Panini does is he gives them a name. So here we have the rule 1.3.1 in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. 1.3.1 means it's in the first chapter, that's 1. Point 3, in the third quarter of that first chapter. Point 1, this is the first sutra in the third quarter of the first chapter of the Ashtadhyayi. This is the first sutra we will see, and also the not most important, but it's the first sutra we will use also. Bhuvadayo dhatavaha. Bhuvadayo dhatavaha. This sutra means that list of these little words which are floating around in space, that list of these words, which begins with the word bhu, all of those little things are called dhatu. So dhatavaha is the plural for dhatu. And bhuvadayo means that list which begins with bhu. That's what that means. That list beginning with the word bhu, which is basically the entire dhatu patha of Panini. That's Panini's dhatu patha. The first dhatu that he gives us is called bhu. And so the first one is bhu, and that list beginning with bhu, all of those things are called as dhatus. Okay? Now that we have named them, we can do something with them. So what we do with them and how we actually use them finally, that we will start to see next time. Okay? Now it's 9:40 over here, which means we have about 20 minutes. In this time, really quickly, I would like to make one appeal to you all. Since we have a nice big group of Sanskrit enthusiasts, Sanskrit learners, we have around, by the way, there's around 1,300 of us now. So we really, from those days of 2-3 people to then suddenly 400 people, and then suddenly 600 people, now we've got 1,300 people. I would like to make an appeal to you all for the sake of saving the study of Sanskrit in the Western world, which in turn impacts the study of Sanskrit in our world here also. I have recently been in touch with the principals of a school system, which is very famous in London, that teaches Sanskrit to its kids. Many people would have heard of these schools. They're called the St. James schools. And these schools teach Sanskrit to their kids. That's part of their education. That's part of their system. And they offer exams for these students to legitimize the study of Sanskrit that they're doing, so that they can actually use these exams in order to move forward when they attend university and so on and so on. And those exams are offered through what's called as the Cambridge International Exams Board. So they have these exams that they offer for these students. But what happened recently is, see, there's this ongoing battle being waged against what is called as the humanities. The humanities are the subjects like philosophy, linguistic, language studies, classics, history, politics. These are called the humanities, which means subjects other than STEM subjects, which is science, technology, engineering, right? Mathematics, medicine, all these things are called STEM subjects. So because the humanities are not seen as immediately productive for society, what we find is that lots of funding bodies are stopping their funding for studies of humanity. And one of the first casualties of this battle is often the study of Sanskrit, which is one of the least known subjects in the humanities. And so they have sent out this appeal. I was recently in touch with them, and they have sent out this appeal that please sign up for the exams that are offered through the Cambridge International Exams Board. And anybody can sign up. You have people, I had students in Cambridge who were like in their 70s who had also signed up for these exams, because they need some minimum number of students in order to keep the exam running. Recently, the Cambridge International Exam Board informed them that we are going to stop these exams. We're going to cut our funding for Sanskrit examination, basically. And so what that means is if that gets cut, then the legitimacy of the program where they're teaching Sanskrit to these kids in the schools also will end, which means that that whole program will be a big failure, and we don't want that. So this is just an appeal that if you can, if you feel like you want to support that cause, then sign up for these exams. You go to www.sanskritexams.org.uk, and you'll see the kind of information about that and all that. So I would request that those of you who feel so inclined to sign up for, even if you don't sign up this year, sign up next year. They say that they will be cutting it in May 2019. So until then, we have to sign up for it. So please sign up, add your number to that list so that they see that there is actually an interest in Sanskrit. So what I'll do is, somebody has said, repeat the site again. So what I'll do is I'll just write the site on the board here. Oh yeah, let me share this. You see, we're all one big family. People who study similar subjects, people who study Sanskrit, and people who study things. We're all one big family. And we all have to support each other if we want our study to survive. So that's why I'm saying, please at least have a look. You don't have to sign up if you don't want to, but at least have a look. So that's all about that. I thought that it was important enough that I should mention it here, because this is the fate of Sanskrit study in the future. So this is that website. Write it down if you want. I'll send it in an email to everybody also. Okay, so now okay, now if you can stop sharing the screen, please, Srijitji. Srijit, hello. Can you stop sharing the screen, please? Thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so that's enough about that. Now we have seen the sutra Bhuvadayo Dhatavaha. It follows the rules of a sutra. It's short, it has some meaning. It tells us to do something, which is to name all of these little words like bhu, ni, pat, da, pa, ri, all these little tiny things are there. These are all called dhatus now. Now that we have named them, see, when a baby is born, the first thing the doctor says, and what is the name of this child? And then you have to be like, it is Varun. Okay, fine, written down. Thank you. Okay, now you may hold your baby, this, that, whatever. So the first thing you do is you name that child. Now in India, we had this funny tradition that you don't name the child immediately. You don't name them directly. First, you give them some kind of house name, some pet name, So what I mentioned, where you have puppy and you have Bobby and all these different names. And then after a couple of years, then you name them, their official name on paper. So that's why they end up having these two names, double names and triple names and all that stuff. So once you name it, then you can interact with it. Now that we have named them, we will interact with them. And the whole game of Sanskrit grammar is you take that dhatu, which we have now named as a dhatu, and with that thing, you combine it with some pratyaya, which I mentioned is some kind of a suffix, in order to make a word that we can use. For example, you have bhu. Bhu by itself just means being, but it doesn't actually end up conveying any meaning on its own. So what we have to do is we have to combine it with something that will allow us to speak it in a particular tense or a mood. So we combine it with one pratyaya called tit, and it becomes bhavati. Now, bhavati is a word, it's a verb that I can actually use in a sentence. Bhavati, which means he is, or he becomes, or she becomes, or it becomes, or you become. It's a respectful you also. And so now it's become a word. Or I combine it with another pratyaya and it becomes abhavat, abhavat, which means it was, it happened before. Or I say bhavet, it should happen, may it happen like this. Or I say bhavatu, let it be like this, it should be like this. So we have these different ways of expressing that same little dhatu, but the only reason we're able to interact with it, to actually make words, is because we have named it. That's the first step. Now, once we've named it, what do we do? How do we combine it? How do these little reactions take place to make the words? That's the whole game. That's that board that Panini has laid out that we will now be playing. We'll be learning how to make these moves on this board so that we can finally express ourselves in Sanskrit and actually understand Sanskrit expression when we hear it. So that we will now see next time. What do we do with these things? How do we do something with these things? And so now, having said that, I will take some questions on the Q&A, or if you have any questions, then you can also feel free to ask. Can you open the chat tab? Yeah, chat. I think all those things will come in chat. In case your question is on the Q&A thing, please put it on the chat also, okay? So let us see. Okay. Okay, those of you who saw my article in Hinduism Today, thank you. Okay, good, please, wonderful. Okay, what is the difference between astobham and anavadyam? They both have the same meaning or no? No, astobham means that the word itself should not have any repetition. You shouldn't repeat yourself. So you shouldn't be saying the same thing in two different sutras. They should all have different tasks that they perform. And anavadyam means it should not be flawed. It should not have mistakes. It shouldn't be something where you have to correct it 5 times before it's actually something worth saying. So that's the difference between astobham and anavadyam. Okay, please scroll down. Okay. The source of such a story that can be read in different directions. So there are different stories. What I'll do is I will in the notes I'll mention a couple of those stories so you can see those there. Now remember, two very important things. One is all of the notes and many times some helpful materials and helpful readings or even videos that you can see, I will be posting in our Google Drive folder, which I share every week in that email that I send out to everybody. So that Google Drive folder contains all of the notes. It contains helpful materials. It contains the homework for each week. It also contains the answers from the previous week's homework. So make sure that each week you're checking out that Google Drive folder. And the other thing is that make sure that you are also signing on to the discussion forum. Now that we're actually starting to see some real material, and we're actually taking some real steps in the direction of Sanskrit grammar, the discussions will begin naturally. And so once the discussions begin, you'll want to stay on top of those discussions by joining the discussion forum, which is forum.chinfo.org. So make sure you go there, sign up. It's a different sign-in from your chinfo.org sign-in. So go there, sign up, and then join the Sanskrit webinar discussion forum. So all of those things I'll post there and also in the notes from the Google Drive folder. Okay, can you go down a little bit? An email will, yeah, I'll send an email with all the information. Okay, great, excellent. Okay, what should we say if we want to say only class 2? Ka, pa, cha, ta, tha. All right, very good, very good. Here's something that's very interesting about Panini's Maheshwara Sutras. The question is, what should we say if we want to say only class 2, which is class 2. Now, I haven't defined it like that in our class, but class 2 is used to refer, these class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4 is used to refer to the columns of those consonants in our alphabet. So the first column, which is ka, cha, ta, ta, pa, second column, ka, cha, ta, ta, pa, third column, ga, ja, da, da, ba, ga, ja, da, da, pa, nya, nga, ya, na, na, ma. Like that, we have these columns, and they're called as class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5. So we have ways of referring to the rows. If you want to refer to the row beginning with ka, you just say ku. Remember that? Ku. The row beginning with cha is chu. Then ta is tu, and so on. And then we have ways of referring to different columns also, thanks to the Maheshwara Sutras. So if we want to refer to column number 5, then we'll say nyam, because it starts with nya and it ends with ma. So nya, ma, ga, na, nam. Remember, so that's column 5. Column 4 will be jash, jha, bhai, gha, dha, dash. That's column number 4. And column 3 is jash, ja, ba, ga, da, dash. And then column number 1 is chai, cha, ta, tav, kapai. But there is no way of only referring to column number 2. So this is a very good question, because column number 2 is ka, pa, cha, ta, tha, but the sutra doesn't stop there. So I cannot use any kind of stop in order to refer to only those letters. Now, if you've understood the question, then the answer is something like this. Remember that Panini did not create Sanskrit. He only codified it, which means that he created rules with so much efficiency that if there was anything he didn't need to say, then he simply never said it. That's how much he made his rules concise. So because there is never any need to specifically refer to ka, pa, cha, ta, tha ever anywhere in Sanskrit grammar, because they never have any unique action that happens only to them, therefore Panini didn't even come up with a way of referring only to them. That is how efficient Panini was, that if he doesn't need to refer to it, he won't even come up with a way of referring to it. If you want to refer to it, you have to say ka, pa, cha, ta, tha. But the beauty is you don't need to. You never need to refer only to ka, pa, cha, ta, tha, ever. That is the beauty of this thing. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay, next one. Is the sutra the same as a shloka? This is also a good question. Is it the same as a shloka? No, it's not. So while reading a sutra, how does one split it into padas? You don't split it into padas, because a sutra does not have a meter, so to speak. A sutra is not written in meter. A sutra is written in these tiny, 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 brief, terse statements, like bhuvadayo dhatavaha, what we saw. That's one sutra. That's not a verse. It's not a stanza. It's just a tiny, tiny sentence, which says all those things beginning with bhu are all called dhatus. So it's not the same as a shloka. So you cannot, and a shloka, sorry, for those of you who don't understand, shloka means verse. It means a verse, a stanza, something written in meter. So a sutra and a shloka are not the same thing, not to be confused. Good question. Sorry for not making that clear. Okay, next one. Okay, can you go up real quick? Sorry. Does a little up. So the textbooks that you will have. Now, on the Google Drive, there is now one new folder called textbooks. And in that folder, I have uploaded a PDF of the Ashtadhyayi. I've uploaded a PDF of the Ashtadhyayi, and a PDF of the Dhatu Patha will be coming very soon. Somebody has kindly shared that PDF with me of the Ashtadhyayi, so I decided I'll just share the whole thing. So does the textbook cover the topic of list starting with bhu? The whole textbook is the list starting with bhu. The Dhatu Patha is that list that starts with bhu. The Dhatu Patha literally is that textbook, which is just a list of dhatus, of these different words that start with bhu. Bhu is the first one, so that's why it's called Bhuvadayo. So yes, the textbook is that, and so definitely it covers that topic for sure. Okay, next one. So is 1.3.1 is just a sutra for all letters starting with bha. No, not letters starting with bha. It is for all those words, those tiny little words like bhu, ni, pat, etc. All those little words are compiled into one textbook called as Panini's Dhatu Patha, which is textbook number 2 for us, which I will upload soon. And that textbook starts with bhu, and therefore all of the words in that textbook that start with bhu are all called dhatu. They're all independently named as dhatu. Okay, you guys somebody had a question here? No, okay, keep going. Okay, all right, fine. Keep going. Somebody says, I thought that the rows were referred to as ka varga, cha varga, pa varga, etc. And you are right. This is one way of referring to them. I can say ka varga. When I say ka varga, varga means that group, that row. So the ka varga is that row beginning with ka. That's totally fine. That's also something you can use, and that is a technical way of referring to it as well, which we use in the study of Sanskrit grammar. However, Panini said, that's too long for me. What's the point of saying ka varga when I can come up with a shortcut for saying it in one syllable? He was interested in these monosyllabic things. So he said, I'm just going to refer to it as ku. For him, that was easier. So he refers to it as ku, chu, tu, tu, pu. But we can equally refer to it as ka varga, cha varga, ta varga, ta varga, pa varga. That's totally fine. Okay, so I think that answers all of the questions for now. So we will conclude. And now remember, next time what do? We will be looking into how do we finally interact with these words which we have just now called as dhatu. So are there sutras with which there are dhatu with other letters? Okay, unfortunately, I'm not able to understand the question. It doesn't look like an answer. Okay, that's fine. Now, yes, there will be other sutras that deal with specific sections within that whole group that starts with bhu. That's fine, but we will get there. We'll get there. And maybe if you bring your questions, the questions which haven't yet been answered, or questions which haven't yet been thought of, if you bring those questions to the discussion forum, then that's the perfect place where we can start discussing things in a public way so that everybody can get insights. Maybe you may be asking a question that somebody doesn't know they should have. So when you ask that question, they think, yeah, I have that question also. Then when it gets answered, then many people get benefited at the same time. So that is the importance of the discussion forum. Please sign up there as well. Okay, so we'll conclude. Please put up the concluding mantra. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Thank you all. See you next week. Things get more and more interesting starting now.